Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and hello. I'll tell you a tale from some time ago about one man's defiance to his mortality, a man who has earned his place in modern history. Michael Molloy, the man who wouldn't die, no matter how hard some people tried. His story has gone down in legend, you see, because of what happened in 1933. Our story is set in the US of A, during the Depression, in the darkest of days. The Bronx, New York, in the days of Prohibition, and fighting for your life was an ongoing mission. Since the financial crisis a couple of years before, most of the country was desperate and poor. Politicians were liars and the authorities bent. People were dying just to make their 2 cents. So with that established, let us continue, and I'll carry on telling this story to you. Morals were loose and ethics were sleazy, especially where we start our tale at Marino's Speakeasy. This is Tony Marino, Tony to his friends, the owner of Marino's Bar, busy at weekends. Before the Depression, he'd sell booze all day long, but since the law change, most of his customers were gone. But behind locked doors, he would bust open the moonshine, and customers would drink morning till night time. They'd drink to escape the problems in Marino's Speakeasy, but getting money from his customers was never that easy.
All of my patrons live on Skid Row. I may have my moonshine, but they have no dough. I understand that times are tight, but where does that leave me, my kids, and my wife? And some customers are taking advantage of my good nature. I'm being taken for granted. I can't go to the cops as I ain't supposed to sell booze, so I've got nothing to gain and freaking everything to lose.
One such man, who would drink all day without fail, is the, some would say, hero of this unusual tale. Michael Molloy, Irish-born and bred, with crazy white hair and nose of flushed red. A former firefighter, but now just a drunk, no fixed abode, and clothes of which stunk. Tony would watch Molloy drink whiskey all day, laughing to himself, with no intention to pay. This made him angry, which I'm sure you understand. So with the help of some friends, Tony came up with a plan. One night, Tony sat with his friends, Daniel and Francois, and with the problem of Molloy, they came up with an answer. Daniel said,
Tony, I'm not being funny, but rather than just kill Molloy, we could also make money.
How do you mean, Daniel, my good man? Molloy's just a tramp. So what is your plan?
Well, I have a contact in the insurance game. And well, maybe we take out a policy in Molloy's name. Then maybe, just maybe, we can take several more and cash them all in once he's done for.
That's genius,
said Tony.
What an idea. We could get rich and make Molloy disappear. We could all do with some dollar in these terrible times. And if no one will really miss him, then how can it be a crime?
So the 3 men agreed to carry out this deed, to off Michael Molloy and give in to greed. And after that night and what they'd discussed, they decided to call themselves the Murder Trust. Daniel spoke to his contact the very next day. They filled out the papers and worked out what they'd pay. A share of 3,000, give or take a few bucks, that would sort out their trouble, with a bit of luck. The paperwork required skill of deception. There would be no mistakes, no errors, no exception. They added to their group another egghead, by the name of Joseph Murphy, though his friends called him Red. Once the ink was dry on the life policies, they thought the hard work was over. The rest would be a breeze. The 4 men sat together and with sick twisted joy worked out how they would kill Michael Molloy.
For the policies to pay out, it must look accidental, or at least not look like murder. That was essential.
It can't be traced to the 4 of us. It can't be traced to the Murder Trust.
How about a mugging? That just went awry.
Too suspicious and too tricky to try.
How about a drowning down by the docks?
Since Prohibition, the sea's patrolled by cops.
Electrocution. That often kills.
It's been cut off since I stopped paying the bills.
We could always pray that he falls off his stool. If praying works, then we'll all do it, fool.
Then Tony got a lightning idea. As he had this bar, the answer was clear.
Let's just keep giving him drinks till the alcohol kills him. He's not paying now, so it won't change what we bill him.
So they made sure Malloy's glass was always topped up, which Malloy enjoyed at the bar that he propped up. Despite bottle after bottle of whiskey he consumed, Malloy was no closer to being fatally removed.
It's useless,
Cried Francis.
It's no good at all. It's as if he can't be poisoned by mere alcohol.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe we try another liquid to make this bastard die.
Well, what do you suggest?
Red asked Daniel.
I have beer, but it'll likely just drain the barrel.
No, I suggest we try something stronger than whiskey. Something harsher. Something more risky.
How about turpentine?
Francis submitted. It looked like booze, so it certainly fitted.
We could even flavour it with a touch of scotch.
So they served Malloy terps, and they waited and watched.
I don't believe it.
Tony shouted.
2 bottles of terps and this Maloika just downed it.
You having the antifreeze?
Offered up Red.
Sure, a pint of that stuff, and he'll end up dead.
So they mixed some antifreeze in with his booze. They gave him the whole bottle. They had nothing to lose. At first, it seemed to have little effect. But then with a cough and a splatter, down went Malloy's head. Michael Malloy then fell to the floor. And as the gang approached, he began to snore. And despite that close call, and to Tony's dismay, Malloy came back the very next day. He sat back down on his favourite seat before ordering a whiskey and something to eat. The barmaid placed the bottle in front of Malloy, who just drank away his troubles. Tony was annoyed.
This guy's a machine. He'll put anything away and still come back day after day.
Do you have any nibbles?
Malloy asked the staff.
Drinking makes me hungry.
He said with a laugh. This attitude made Tony's blood boil, before he remembered the oysters that had started to spoil.
These oysters are out of date, not fit to eat. But maybe Malloy could consume this rancid treat, and maybe, just maybe, they'd poison him too, and thus finish him off. Maybe that's what we should do.
So the gang served up the seafood in front of Malloy, which, after the scotch, he easily destroyed. The boys hung back, waiting for the end to start. But all they seemed to do was just make the poor drunk fart. A fishy gas that hung in the air, that stung the nostrils and made curly your hair.
That's better.
The murder trust slammed down their fists.
That guy should be dead, but there he still sits.
How about make him a sandwich with rotten sardines?
Well, if you think that'll work, you must be in a dream. He ate those oysters with no problems at all. What makes you think your plan will be more successful?
Well, how about we mix in some nails and glass? That'll rip over his insides, killing him at last.
Well, that's an idea. I'll speak to the chef.
And see if he has any rat poison left.
So they made a sandwich and filled it with stuff that would slice up his organs and cause his candle to snuff. The gang watched as Malloy ate the snack. They all crossed their fingers and waited at the back. Surely soon Malloy would feel the effects of glass and the shrapnel and the sharp objects. But Malloy just went through it like a knife through butter.
That was delicious. Let's have another.
I don't believe it. How's he not dead? We even left the mold on the stale old bread.
Well, what do we do now? This isn't funny. I've got plans for when we collect that money.
Calm down, boys. We're not done yet. I've another idea.
Don't worry. Don't fret. As you can see, it's cold outside. Let's say we take Michael out for a ride. What, take him ice skating or for an ice cream? It's not his bloody birthday. What do you mean?
Despite his iron stomach, Malloy is frail and old. What would happen if we left him out in the cold? Hypothermia kills people every night, so no one would assume anything, and we'd be all right.
The gang approached Malloy as he drunkenly dozed and took him outside after the bar closed. To the local park, it was 20 below, stripped him naked and laid him down in the snow. They poured cold water on him just to make sure. They took no chances, unlike before. No one could survive a temperature like this. Not even Malloy would return from this frosty abyss. Tony smiled, but inside still felt bad. But it was the country that had driven him desperate and mad. The gang just left him in the cold night air, convinced that this would be the end of this grisly affair. However, who should turn up the very next night and give the gang a serious fright?
I've seen some things as I traveled coast to coast, and now I think that I'd seen a ghost.
Evening, guys. How are things? Your company is pleasing. Not sure what time I left last night, but it was feckin' freezing.
This can't be real.
Daniel whispered.
No one could survive that. If you told me you'd been sitting here, I would have eaten my hat.
But this was no ghost sat there, a chair under his arse. In fact, the only spirit was the one in Michael's glass. He flashed a grin and continued to drink his liquor. The murder trust could not collect. This really was a kicker.
I'll tell you what.
A voice chipped in.
I'll hit him with my van. Just give me a cut of the payout. Does that sound like a plan?
The gang looked over to Hershey Green, another drinker in the bar. He was a dodgy-looking fellow with a dodgy-looking car. The boys then looked at each other and agreed to Hershey's plan. This could be the best way of succeeding with their deadly scam. So now the extended gang had more drive, even if the whole payout would now be shared by 5. At closing time that evening, Malloy passed out again. The gang carried him to the street and to his hopeful end. Hershey started his car. Daniel and Francis held him upright. Tony was the lookout on that cold and deadly night. Hershey put his foot down and sped towards the gang, who pushed Malloy into its path. He hit the car with a bang. Malloy went flying in the air, such was the force of impact, and landed with a thud, his body battered, broken and abstract. Malloy lay crumpled on the floor in a pool of blood. Surely this had killed him. Enough was enough. The gang left the scene, not wanting to get caught. The last thing they wanted were witnesses to be bribed and bought.
I'll just take my cut now.
Hershey Green suggested.
Let's just wait.
Marina requested.
We've been here before. We need to make sure he's dead. As with no death certificate, we won't get the bread.
The next day at the bar, Michael's stall remained vacant, and with every passing hour, they were closer to payment.
I'm gonna buy my very own car.
Just don't do what I did. Don't buy a bar.
3 days had passed since that hit and run, and the murder trust had come to terms with what they had done. But as they imagined the money and pictured the joy, in walked Michael Malloy.
What the hell? What the?
Limping and battered, but definitely alive.
How in the name of sweet Jesus did he survive?
Evening, boys. Long time no see. I had a bit of an accident happen to me. Apparently, I got hit by a car, but no real injuries, just bruises and scars. The doctor says I need to keep off my feet. So let's open that bottle and I'll have a shot neat.
This needs to be over. Let's just shoot him in the head.
Don't be hasty, Francis. He needs to look accidentally dead.
I'm with Francis. This has gone too far. We tried poison, hypothermia. We've tried drink, we've tried car. He just sits there. He's taking the piss. How many more times must we aim and we miss?
There must be another way to kill this guy. He just gets up, no matter what method we try.
The Murder Trust were getting frustrated. They'd tried everything, and Malloy's life had not yet been truncated. Was this man made of bone and flesh? They'd tried everything, surely. What else was left? But Michael Malloy just sat drinking at the bar, numbing the injuries he'd received from the car, telling tales about his encounters with a nurse, joking that maybe he got knocked down by a hearse.
With all the cab drivers and oysters and today's price of turps, the cost of our plan is starting to outweigh our return. Let's just finish him off before he costs us it all. All these failures are making us look like idiots and fools.
Like I said, let's just shoot him or burn him alive. And from that, surely not even Malloy can survive.
No,
Said Marino.
we can't mess about. If it looks like murder, then the insurance won't pay out.
Well, what then?
Said Daniel. And a thought came to Red.
We could fake pneumonia if we gassed him instead.
The Murder Trust looked at each other as smiles grew, and Murphy explained what he thought they should do. True to form, Malloy passed out at closing time. Then the gang picked him up and dragged him outside. Next, they took him to Red's flat, which was just down the street. Then they bound his hands and tied up his feet. Red grabbed a pipe and put one end in Malloy's mouth, before attaching the other end to where his gas came out. The others watched as he turned on the tap and fed Malloy carbon dioxide as he took a nap. Red told the others,
This gas is so cheap, but it looked like he caught pneumonia while he was asleep. But if he starts to struggle or begins to choke, cover his mouth with those towels or that cloak.
After a while, Malloy started to squirm, and the others restricted him moving and held on firm. Tony grabbed the towels and stuffed them in his face, and death took Malloy in its warm embrace. The 5 men stood over the corpse of Michael Malloy. Although this was what they wanted, they exuded no joy. They stood in silence and weighed up the deed, and thought about what they'd done in the name of greed. They silently went home, leaving the body there, so a doctor could be called and death to be declared. Identity confirmed, paperwork signed, money paid out, shared and assigned.
Really, was all that fuss worth what we got? We murdered a man. In return, not a lot.
We spent so much and received only a few bucks.
Well, we got the result we wanted, but we're still out of luck.
Tony had to admit it wasn't the best plan, bringing in so many people just to kill one man. And as the gang argued, matters got worse, as their heated discussion had been overheard. Tony's wife was shocked upon hearing the gang, so in the name of justice, to the law she ran. She told the police of the murderous deed, of fraud and murder, conspiracy and greed. Further investigations uncovered foul play, and the police turned up at Marino's the next day. Arrests were made for the murderous quintet, and in no time at all, a trial was set.
You're all guilty. Guilty as sin. Fraud, murder, oh, where to begin? This is the easiest sentence I've handed out in my time. You're just lucky that being stupid isn't a crime.
For Hershey's involvement, he got life in prison, but the other 4's actions could not be forgiven. Sent to the chair where each of them would fry for killing a man who wouldn't die.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very nice of you. Thank you. Oh, diddly 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 dee, diddly diddly da dee, diddly 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 da, diddly day diddly dee da 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 dee, diddly 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 dee, diddly diddly da da.